The first time I saw Dolores Kensington march up my driveway with her clipboard and measuring tape, I should have known my peaceful life in Saguaro Springs was about to become a living nightmare. It was a sweltering Tuesday morning in late August, the kind where the Phoenix heat makes the asphalt shimmer like water, and I was rushing to get my 15-year-old daughter Maya off to school before heading to my home office. "Excuse me, Ms. Chen." Dolores called out, her shrill voice cutting through the desert air like a rusty knife. She stood there in her crisp white polo shirt and khaki shorts, the unofficial uniform of HOA board presidents, everywhere her silver hair pulled back so tight it looked painful. "I need to discuss several violations with you immediately." I paused at my car door keys jangling in my hand. "Violations? What violations?" "Your mailbox is 2 3/4 inches too far to the right of center, according to our architectural guidelines," she said, consulting her clipboard with the gravity of a Supreme Court justice. "And your grass height exceeds the maximum allowable length by approximately half an inch in the northeast corner of your front yard." I stared at her, certain I'd misheard. "Are you serious right now?" "The Saguaro Springs Homeowners Association takes community standards very seriously, Ms. Chen. These violations carry a fine of $150 each, plus a $25 administrative fee." She clicked her pen with the satisfaction of someone who'd just solved world hunger. "You have 7 days to remedy these issues or face additional penalties." Maya poked her head out of the passenger side window, her dark eyes wide with teenage outrage. "Mom, is this lady for real?" "Get back in the car, honey," I said, my voice tight with controlled fury. I turned back to Dolores. "Mrs. Kensington, I've lived here for 3 years. My mailbox hasn't moved, and my grass gets cut every Saturday by the same lawn service that handles half the neighborhood. Nevertheless, the violations exist." She sniffed. "I have photographic evidence and measurements. The board voted unanimously last night to begin enforcement of previously overlooked infractions." "Previously overlooked?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You mean things that were perfectly fine until now?" "Standards evolve, Ms. Chen. We must all do our part to maintain property values." She handed me a certified letter that felt like it weighed 10 pounds. "7 days, good morning." As she click-clacked back down my driveway in her sensible white sneakers, Maya leaned over from the car. "Mom, what's wrong with these people?" "I honestly don't know, baby," I muttered, ripping open the letter. The official HOA letterhead felt absurdly pompous for what amounted to legalized harassment. "I honestly don't know." That evening, after Maya had gone to her room to video chat with friends, I sat at my kitchen table with a measuring tape and the HOA architectural guidelines, all 47 pages of them. My mailbox, a simple black metal box that had come with the house when I bought it, sat exactly where it had always been. I measured it 3 times. It was perfectly centered on the property line, exactly as specified in Section 12.4.3 of the guidelines. The grass situation was even more ridiculous. I walked my front yard with a ruler checking every blade. The longest I found was 2 1/8 inches, well within the maximum 3-inch height requirement listed in Section 8.2.1. "This is insane," I said aloud to my empty yard, feeling foolish for talking to myself but too angry to care. My neighbor Tom Rodriguez poked his head over our shared fence. "Everything okay over there, Sarah?" Tom was a retired electrician in his 60s, a friendly man who'd helped me install new ceiling fans when I first moved in. His wife, Maria, made the best tamales in the neighborhood and always brought extras when she cooked. "Dolores Kensington paid me a visit this morning," I said, walking over to the fence. "Apparently my mailbox is too far to the right and my grass is too long." Tom's weathered face creased into a frown. "That woman's lost her mind. She came by yesterday and told Maria our garden hose was the wrong color green, said it clashed with our house trim, and we needed to replace it with a forest green one by next week or face a fine." "You're kidding." I wish I was. She also measured our garbage cans and said they were sitting 3 inches too close to the curb on pickup day. He shook his head. "We've been putting them in the same spot for 8 years." I felt a cold knot forming in my stomach. Is she doing this to everyone? Seems like it. I talked to Bill across the street, and she dinged him for having his car parked 6 inches over his driveway's edge into his own lawn. His own lawn, Sarah. And the Johnsons' 2 houses down got cited because their front porch light is apparently the wrong shade of white. This can't be legal. "Legal and right are two different things," Tom said grimly. "But I'll tell you what, I think it's time somebody stood up to her." The next morning brought another surprise. I was working from home debugging code for a client's e-commerce platform when my doorbell camera chimed. Through the app on my phone, I watched Dolores march up my driveway again, this time accompanied by a younger woman with a blonde ponytail and an expensive-looking camera. I opened the front door before they could ring the bell. "Mrs. Kensington, what can I do for you now?" "This is Jennifer Walsh, our new HOA violations photographer," Dolores announced as if introducing the Secretary of Defense. "We're here to document the ongoing violations we discussed yesterday." Jennifer raised her camera toward my mailbox. "Ma'am, I'll need you to step aside so I can get clear shots for the file." "Hold on just a minute," I said, stepping fully outside and closing the door behind me. "You can't just come onto my property and start taking pictures without permission." According to the CCNRs you signed when you purchased your home, Dolores said, producing yet another official looking document, the HOA has the right to inspect any portion of your property visible from common areas for compliance purposes. My driveway isn't a common area, but it's visible from the street, which is. Dolores smiled the kind of smile that never reached the eyes. Jennifer, please proceed with the documentation. I watched in mounting fury as this stranger photographed my mailbox from multiple angles, zoomed in on my grass, and even took pictures of my garbage cans, which weren't even at the curb since pickup wasn't until Thursday. I measured everything last night, I said, my voice tight with controlled anger. My mailbox is perfectly centered, my grass is well within the height limits. Our measurements differ from yours, Dolores replied smoothly. The board will review Jennifer's photographic evidence along with my field measurements and make a final determination. What field measurements? You never measured anything yesterday. You just walked up here and started making accusations. Dolores pulled out a metal measuring tape with a flourish that would have been comical if it weren't so infuriating. I always measure, Ms. Chen, always. I watched her stretch the tape from some arbitrary point on my lawn to my mailbox post. She didn't measure from the property line or from the center of my driveway or from any other logical reference point I could identify. She just held one end of the tape against the ground near my sidewalk and stretched it to my mailbox. 2 3/4 inches to the right of center, she announced triumphantly. Center of what I demanded. You didn't establish a baseline. You can't just measure from a random spot and call it official. I've been doing HOA compliance inspections for 12 years, Ms. Chen. I know how to measure. Jennifer lowered her camera. Ma'am, maybe I should explain the process. We use a standardized measurement protocol. Jennifer Dolores cut her off sharply. We don't discuss methodology with residents. It's proprietary information. I felt my face flush hot with anger. Proprietary information for measuring a mailbox. The board has voted to maintain strict confidentiality around our enforcement procedures to prevent residents from attempting to circumvent compliance requirements, Dolores said in the tone of someone reading from a script. Now, this is absolutely ridiculous. What's ridiculous? Dolores said, her voice dropping to a dangerously quiet level, is residents who think the rules don't apply to them. You have 6 days remaining to correct these violations, Ms. Chen. I suggest you use them wisely. After they left, I sat in my living room with my laptop researching Arizona HOA law until my eyes burned. What I found wasn't encouraging. HOAs in Arizona had broad powers to enforce their covenants, conditions, and restrictions. They could fine residents, place liens on properties, and even foreclose on homes for unpaid assessments. But they also had to follow specific procedures, provide due process, and couldn't act arbitrarily or in bad faith. The question was whether what Dolores was doing qualified as bad faith or arbitrary enforcement. I had a sinking feeling that proving it would be harder than I'd hoped. That evening, Maya found me still hunched over my laptop at the kitchen table. Mom, you're doing that thing where you get all obsessed with solving a problem. This isn't just a problem, sweetheart. This is our home, and some power-hungry woman is trying to bully us out of it. Maya plopped down in the chair across from me. Can't you just move the mailbox thing and cut the grass really short? It's not about the mailbox or the grass, I said, rubbing my tired eyes. Your mailbox is fine and the grass is fine. This is about someone abusing their authority to harass people. If I give in now, what's next? Will she decide our front door is the wrong color? Will she say your bike is parked wrong in our own driveway? But is it really worth all this stress? I looked at my daughter, so pragmatic at 15, and felt a surge of protectiveness. Yes, it is. Because if we don't stand up to bullies, they keep bullying, and I won't let anyone push us around in our own home. The next day was Saturday, and I was up early mowing the lawn when Tom Rodriguez appeared at the fence again. Sarah, you got a minute? I shut off the mower and walked over. What's up? Maria and I were talking, and we want to do something about this Dolores situation, but we need to know, are you planning to fight this thing? I'm planning to fight it with everything I've got. Tom grinned. Good. Because Maria's been on the phone with half the neighborhood, and let me tell you, we're not the only ones getting hit with these ridiculous violations. The Patels got fined because their rose bushes are apparently the wrong shade of pink. Pink Sarah. And old Mrs. Henderson down on Cactus Lane got cited because her welcome mat has fringe on it, which apparently violates some aesthetic guideline nobody's ever heard of. How is any of this legal? That's what we're trying to figure out. Bill Morrison's daughter is a paralegal and she's looking into it. But in the meantime, we're thinking about circulating a petition to recall the entire HOA board. My heart jumped. Can we do that? According to the bylaws, yeah. We need signatures from 30% of the homeowners to call a special election. There are 240 houses in Saguaro Springs, so we need 72 signatures. How many people are getting hit with these violation notices? As of this morning, Maria's counted 37 families, and those are just the ones we know about. I felt the first flicker of hope I'd had since this whole mess started. What do you need me to do? And keep documenting everything. Take pictures, save every piece of paper they give you, record any conversations if Arizona law allows it, which it does, by the way, since we're a one-party consent state. And be prepared to testify about what's been happening to you if we get enough signatures for the recall. That afternoon, I received another certified letter. This one informed me that I'd failed to correct the previous violations and was now subject to additional fines. The total amount due was $450 with a payment deadline of 5 business days. Failure to pay would result in the assessment becoming a lien against my property. I was reading the letter for the third time when my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize. Hello, Ms. Chen. This is Jennifer Walsh. I was at your house yesterday with Mrs. Kensington. I remember. I was wondering if we could talk privately. I felt my pulse quicken. About what? About the measurements and some other things. Could we meet somewhere neutral? Maybe that coffee shop on Bell Road. An hour later, I sat across from Jennifer Walsh at a corner table in Desert Brew Coffee, studying her face as she nervously stirred her latte. Up close, she looked younger than I'd initially thought, probably late 20s with tired eyes and an anxious expression. I need to tell you something, she said, glancing around the busy coffee shop as if checking for spies. The measurements Mrs. Kensington is using, they're not real. What do you mean, not real? I mean, she's making them up. I've been the violations photographer for 3 months now, and I've never seen her actually measure anything properly. She just points at stuff and declares it non-compliant. I leaned forward. Are you willing to testify to that? Jennifer's hands shook slightly as she lifted her cup. That's why I wanted to meet with you. I can't keep doing this job. It's not right what she's doing to people, but I need to know if I speak up, will anyone back me up? Because Mrs. Kensington is not someone you want as an enemy. What do you mean? She's gotten 3 people fired from their jobs by calling their employers and complaining about their anti-community attitudes. She had the Hendersons' grandson arrested for trespassing when he came to help them move furniture. Said he was a suspicious person loitering in the neighborhood. And last month, she somehow got the city to red tag the Patel family's fence renovation project, claiming it violated setback requirements even though they had all the proper permits. I felt cold despite the warm coffee shop. She can do all that. She's been HOA president for 6 years. She knows people at the city, people in code enforcement, people everywhere. And she keeps detailed files on every resident, not just violation stuff, but personal information. Where people work, what cars they drive, who visits them, everything. That's not legal surveillance, is it? I don't know what's legal and what isn't, but I know it's wrong. Jennifer pulled out her phone. I've been taking pictures of everything she's asked me to document, but I've also been taking pictures of my own measurements. Want to see? She scrolled through her photo gallery and turned the phone toward me. The first image showed my mailbox with a measuring tape clearly indicating it was perfectly centered on my property line. The second showed my grass at various points, none exceeding 2¼ inches in height. These are from the day we came to your house, Jennifer said. Your mailbox is fine, your grass is fine. Everything she cited you for is completely made up. Why are you helping me? Jennifer was quiet for a long moment. Because I have a little sister about your daughter's age, and if someone was doing this to my family, I'd want somebody to speak up. We talked for another hour. Jennifer agreed to meet with Tom Rodriguez and the other neighbors who were organizing the recall effort. She also agreed to turn over her photographs and measurements to anyone who needed them for legal purposes. But she asked for one thing in return. When this all comes out, and I think it's going to come out whether I help or not, I need people to know that I tried to do the right thing. I need my name cleared. Of course. And Mrs. Chen, be careful. I've seen what Dolores does to people who cross her. She's not going to just roll over and accept defeat. That evening, I called Tom to update him on my conversation with Jennifer. He was excited about having a potential witness, but his next words made my stomach drop. Sarah, there's something else you need to know. Dolores filed a complaint with the city about your home business. My home business, your software consultant, she's claiming you're running a commercial operation in a residential zone without proper permits. I sank onto my couch. But I work from home for clients. Lots of people work from home. That's what we told the city inspector when he called. But apparently, she provided them with evidence that you have clients coming to your house for meetings. I've never had a client to my house, ever. All my work is remote. We know that. But the inspector is required to investigate all complaints. He's coming by Monday morning to look at your home office setup. After I hung up with Tom, I sat in my living room feeling like the walls were closing in. Maya was at her dad's house for the weekend, which was probably for the best. I didn't want her to see me this rattled. I spent Sunday documenting everything I could think of. I printed out every email exchange I'd had with clients for the past 6 months, showing that all my work was conducted remotely. I organized my home office to make it clear that it was a personal workspace, not a commercial facility. I even called my ex-husband David to give him a heads up that our daughter might be in the middle of an HOA dispute. Sarah, this sounds completely insane, David said. Can't you just pay the fines and move on? It's not about the money, David. It's about the principle. Principles don't keep Maya from being stressed out about her home situation. Maya is stressed because some power-hungry woman is harassing her mother, not because I'm standing up for our rights. Just be careful, okay? I know how you get when you think you're fighting the good fight. Sometimes you need to pick your battles. Monday morning arrived gray and cloudy, unusual for late August in Phoenix. I was setting up my laptop in the kitchen, so my home office would be available for inspection when the doorbell rang. The city inspector was a tired looking man in his 50s, with kind eyes and a clipboard that looked like it had seen better days. Ms. Chen, I'm Bob Martinez from the city zoning department. I understand there's been a complaint about a home business. Please come in, Mr. Martinez, and thank you for coming out on such short notice. I showed him my home office, explained my work, and provided documentation of my business activities. He took notes, asked a few questions about client interactions, and seemed satisfied that I was operating within the bounds of normal home based work. Ms. Chen, I don't see any zoning violations here, he said as we walked back toward the front door. Your setup is well within the guidelines for home based businesses. However, I do need to ask, have you had any in person client meetings here in the past 6 months? Never. All my work is conducted via phone, email, and video conference. The complaint specifically mentioned client vehicles parked in your driveway and people carrying briefcases and laptops into your house. I felt my face flush with anger. Mr. Martinez, the only people who come to my house regularly are my daughter, my ex-husband, when he picks her up or drops her off, and occasionally neighbors. I suppose someone could mistake my neighbor Tom for a client if they saw him carrying his tablet when he comes over to troubleshoot his Wi-Fi issues. Bob Martinez made a note on his clipboard. Ma'am, between you and me, we get a lot of HOA-related complaints. Most of them don't amount to much, but I have to investigate them all the same. I understand. That said, whoever filed this complaint provided very specific details about dates and times when these alleged client meetings took place. I'm required to ask, do you have any security camera footage that might help clarify the situation? My heart jumped. Actually, I do. I pulled up my doorbell camera app and scrolled back through the past month of footage. Mr. Martinez, would you like to see exactly who has come to my house and when? We spent the next 20 minutes reviewing camera footage. The only people who had approached my front door in the past month were delivery drivers Maya and her friends David during custody exchanges, Tom and Maria from next door, and Dolores Kensington with Jennifer Walsh. Well, Bob Martinez said, closing his clipboard, I think that settles it. Ms. Chen, you're in full compliance with city zoning requirements. I'll note in my report that the complaint appears to have been filed in error. After he left, I immediately called Tom to update him on the situation, but before I could say anything, he interrupted me. Sarah, thank God you picked up. We have an emergency. What kind of emergency? Dolores is calling another special board meeting for tonight. She's proposing new architectural guidelines that would basically make half the existing homes in the neighborhood non-compliant overnight. She can do that. Apparently so if there's not enough opposition at the meeting. And here's the thing, she's only required to give 24 hours notice to homeowners, which she did by posting a single notice on the community bulletin board at 7 this morning. I looked at the clock. It was almost noon. How many people know about this meeting? As of right now, maybe a dozen. Maria's making phone calls, but a lot of people are at work and don't check the community board regularly. What are these new guidelines? Front yard grass can't exceed 1.5 inches. Mailboxes have to be exactly 16 inches from the street-facing edge of the driveway, not the center of the property line. Garden hoses must be forest green or black only. Welcome mats can't have patterns, fringe, or text other than street addresses. And here's the big one. Any home modifications made without explicit HOA pre-approval in the past 5 years have to be removed or brought into compliance within 30 days. I felt dizzy. Tom, that would affect almost every house in the neighborhood. Exactly. And the fines for noncompliance would start at $500 per violation. This is insane. She's trying to force people out of the neighborhood or generate enough fine revenue to fill the HOA's coffers. Either way, we can't let this pass. What time is the meeting? 7 tonight at the community center. I'll be there. I spent the afternoon making my own phone calls, reaching out to every neighbor whose number I had. Most people were shocked to hear about the proposed changes, but several expressed reluctance to attend the meeting. I can't afford to get on Dolores's bad side, said Janet Patterson from 3 houses down. She already has it out for the Hendersons. I don't want to be next. But Janet, if these new rules pass, you'll be fined for your welcome mat and your garden hose anyway. Maybe I can just replace them quietly and hope she doesn't notice. That's exactly what she's counting on, that people will be too scared to stand up to her. By 5 o'clock, I'd managed to reach 32 neighbors. 18 promised to attend the meeting. 6 were out of town, and 8 refused to get involved. It wasn't nearly enough, but it was a start. Maya came home from her dad's house just as I was getting ready to leave for the community center. Mom, you look like you're going to war. In a way, I am, sweetheart. Can I come with you? I hesitated. It might get ugly, Maya. Mom, this is our home too. If some crazy lady is trying to mess with it, I want to be there. At 10 minutes to 7, Maya and I walked into the Saguaro Springs Community Center. The main room was set up with folding chairs in rows, facing a table at the front where 3 people sat. Dolores Kensington in the center, flanked by a nervous-looking man I recognized as Treasurer Harold Pine, and a woman I didn't know who was presumably the secretary. I counted heads as we took seats in the back row. 26 residents were present, including Maya and me. Tom and Maria Rodriguez sat near the front along with several other neighbors I'd spoken to that afternoon. Dolores called the meeting to order at exactly 7 o'clock. Good evening, residents. We have several important items on tonight's agenda, but I'll begin with the most pressing matter, a comprehensive update to our architectural guidelines. She began reading from a prepared statement outlining the proposed changes in excruciating detail. As she spoke, I noticed more people trickling in. By the time she finished her presentation, we had 38 residents in attendance. These updates are necessary to maintain property values and community standards, Dolores concluded. The board has reviewed similar successful implementations in other Arizona HOA communities and believes these changes will benefit everyone. Tom Rodriguez stood up. Mrs. Kensington, I have several questions about these proposed changes. The floor is open for discussion, Mr. Rodriguez. First, were any residents consulted before drafting these new guidelines? The board conducts its business according to established procedures, Mr. Rodriguez. Resident input is welcome during designated comment periods. That's not an answer to my question. Were residents consulted? Dolores's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. The board operates with the authority granted to it by the community's CC&Rs. We are not required to seek approval for every decision. Maria Rodriguez stood up beside her husband. Mrs. Kensington, my family has lived here for 8 years. In all that time, our grass has never been longer than what you're now saying is too long. Why the sudden change? As I explained, Mrs. Rodriguez's standards evolved to meet the needs of the community. Whose needs? Called out Bill Morrison from the middle of the room. Because it seems like the only person who needs these changes is you. A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Dolores banged a small gavel on the table. Mr. Morrison, you're out of order. Comments must be addressed to the chair. Fine, Bill said, turning to face her directly. Madam Chair, whose needs do these changes serve? Because they certainly don't serve mine or my neighbors or anyone else I've talked to. The board's duty is to act in the best interests of the entire community, even when individual residents may not immediately understand the benefits. I felt my temper flare. Before I could stop myself, I stood up. Mrs. Kensington, are you saying that we're too stupid to understand what's good for us? Ms. Chen, I would remind you that you currently have outstanding violations and fines. Perhaps you should focus on achieving compliance before questioning board decisions. My outstanding violations are based on false measurements and fabricated evidence. The room went dead quiet. I could hear the air conditioning humming in the background and someone's cell phone buzzing. Dolores's face flushed red. Ms. Chen, I'll thank you not to make unfounded accusations against... they're not unfounded, I interrupted. I have photographic evidence that my mailbox is properly positioned and my grass is within guidelines. I also have witness testimony that you're using arbitrary measurement techniques to justify these violations. That's a very serious allegation, Ms. Chen. Yes, it is, and I'm prepared to prove it in court if necessary. Harold Pine. The treasurer leaned over and whispered something in Dolores's ear. She shook her head sharply and turned back to the microphone. This meeting is about architectural guideline updates, not individual violation disputes. If you have issues with your citations, you may request a hearing through the proper channels. Tom Rodriguez stood up again. Mrs. Kensington, I call for a vote of no confidence in the current board. Mr. Rodriguez, that's not on tonight's agenda. According to the bylaws, any resident may call for a no confidence vote during the discussion period of any board meeting. I am making that motion now. Dolores looked flustered for the first time since I'd known her. That's not how this works. Actually, it is, said a new voice from the back of the room. Everyone turned to see a tall, gray-haired man in a business suit standing near the door. I'm sorry I'm late. I'm James Morrison, Bill's son-in-law. I'm also an attorney specializing in HOA law. Bill Morrison grinned. I called James this afternoon and asked him to drive down from Flagstaff. James walked to the front of the room. Mrs. Kensington, may I see a copy of the community's governing documents? Dolores reluctantly handed over a thick binder. James flipped through it quickly, found what he was looking for, and turned to address the room. According to Article 7, Section 3 of your bylaws, any resident may call for a vote of no confidence in the board during the discussion period of any regular or special board meeting. If such a motion receives a second from another resident and passes by majority vote, of those present, the board must be dissolved and new elections must be held within 60 days. I second the motion, Maria Rodriguez called out immediately. I second it too, said Janet Patterson, the woman who had been afraid to get on Dolores's bad side. All those in favor of a vote of no confidence in the current board, please raise your hands, James said. Hands shot up all over the room. I counted quickly. 34 out of 38 residents present voted in favor. Dolores looked like she'd been slept. This is highly irregular. We need to verify the vote count and, ma'am, James said gently but firmly, the vote is clear and unambiguous. According to your own bylaws, this board is dissolved effective immediately. You can't just, this isn't, Dolores sputtered. Mrs. Kensington, Tom Rodriguez said, standing up again, I move that we postpone any vote on the proposed architectural guidelines until after new board elections can be held. Seconded, called out half a dozen voices. All in favor. This time 36 hands went up. James Morrison nodded. Motion carries. The proposed architectural guideline changes are tabled pending new board elections. As the meeting broke up into small groups of animated conversation, I watched Dolores gather her papers with shaking hands. Harold Pine and the secretary had already left their seats and were talking quietly near the exit. Maya tugged on my arm. Mom, does this mean you don't have to pay those fines? I'm not sure, sweetheart, but it's a good start. James Morrison approached us as we were preparing to leave. Ms. Chen, I understand you've been having some issues with violation notices. That's putting it mildly. Would you be willing to document everything that's happened? I have a feeling we're going to need detailed records when we start sorting out this mess. Over the next week, the full scope of Dolores Kensington's reign of terror became clear. James Morrison set up a temporary office in the community center and invited residents to come forward with their stories. What he found was staggering. 37 families had received violation notices in the past 3 months, with total fines exceeding $23,000. Most of the violations were based on arbitrary or fabricated measurements. Several residents had been targeted for harassment through false complaints to city departments, and the HOA's financial records showed irregularities that suggested possible misuse of assessment funds. Jennifer Walsh came forward with her photographs and testimony about Dolores's measurement techniques. She also revealed that Dolores had instructed her to photograph residents and their visitors for a security database that appeared to be nothing more than a surveillance operation. But the most damning evidence came from an unexpected source. Harold Pine, the now former treasurer, approached James Morrison privately and turned over financial records showing that Dolores had been diverting fine money into a separate account controlled solely by her. The funds were supposed to go toward community maintenance and improvements, but instead had been accumulating in what amounted to Dolores's personal slush fund. She told me it was for emergency repairs, Harold explained during a recorded interview. Said we needed to keep the money separate so it wouldn't get tied up in budget approvals. But then she started using it for things like hiring private investigators to check up on residents and paying for legal consultations about how to maximize fine collections. The revelation sent shockwaves through Saguaro Springs. Several residents who had quietly paid their fines rather than fight them now realized they'd been victims of what amounted to legalized theft. James Morrison filed complaints with the Arizona Department of Real Estate, which oversees HOA compliance, and the Maricopa County Attorney's Office. He also helped affected residents file a class action lawsuit against Dolores personally for the return of improperly collected fines. Meanwhile, the community organized new board elections. Tom Rodriguez agreed to run for president with Maria as secretary and Janet Patterson as treasurer. Their platform was simple, transparent governance, reasonable enforcement of existing rules, and an end to harassment-based compliance strategies. The election was held on a Saturday morning in the community center. Turnout was unprecedented. 187 of the neighborhood's 240 eligible households participated. Tom Slate won with over 90% of the vote. But Dolores wasn't going quietly. On the Tuesday after the election, I received another certified letter, this one from a law firm claiming to represent her interests. The letter demanded that I cease making defamatory statements about Mrs. Kensington and threatening legal action if I continued to spread false information about her character and professional conduct. I showed the letter to James Morrison, who laughed out loud. She's hired Morton and Associates. They're known for sending scary letters on behalf of clients who don't actually have legal grounds for anything. It's the intimidation tactic. So I should ignore it. You should document it as evidence of continued harassment. And Ms. Chen, you might want to consider filing a restraining order. That evening, I sat Maya down for a serious conversation about what had been happening and what might happen next. Mom, is Mrs. Kensington going to jail? She asked. I don't know, sweetheart, but she's definitely not going to be in charge of our neighborhood anymore. Good, she was scary. Maya, I want you to understand something. What we did, standing up to her, it wasn't easy and it wasn't always safe. But sometimes you have to fight for what's right, even when it's hard. I know, Mom. You taught me that. And sometimes the fight isn't quick or simple. This whole thing took months to resolve, and we're still dealing with some of the aftermath. Maya nodded seriously. But we won, right? We won. The class action lawsuit took 8 months to resolve. Dolores ultimately agreed to pay restitution, totaling $34,000 to affected residents plus attorney fees. She also signed an agreement prohibiting her from serving on any HOA board in Arizona for 5 years. The state investigation resulted in additional penalties and requirements for improved financial oversight in the Saguaro Springs HOA. The community implemented new bylaws requiring board meetings to be recorded violation notices to include photographic evidence and detailed measurement documentation, and all fines to be approved by majority board vote rather than individual members. Jennifer Walsh got a new job with a legitimate property management company and sent me a Christmas card thanking me for encouraging her to do the right thing. Harold Pine moved to a retirement community in Tucson, saying he'd had enough of HOA drama for one lifetime. As for me, my violation notices were formally rescinded by the new board, along with all associated fines. The city inspector who had investigated my home business complaint wrote a letter for my file stating that the complaint had been filed in bad faith by an individual with a pattern of harassing behavior toward community residents. On a warm evening in December, nearly 4 months after the recall vote, I was watering my front garden when Tom Rodriguez walked over from his house. Sarah, you got a minute? Always. What's up? Maria and I were talking, and we realized we never properly thanked you. For what? For having the guts to stand up to that woman when the rest of us were too scared. If you hadn't fought those bogus violation notices, we'd all still be living under her thumb. I smiled, looking out over our peaceful neighborhood. Kids were riding bikes in the street, neighbors were chatting over fences, and the only clipboard in sight belonged to Maya, who was organizing a fundraiser for her school's robotics team. Tom, I didn't do it alone. It took all of us working together. Maybe so, but you threw the first punch. That night, as I was tucking Maya into bed, she asked me something that made me pause. Mom, do you think Mrs. Kensington learned her lesson? I considered the question carefully. I think she learned that she can't get away with bullying people indefinitely. Whether that changes how she treats people in the future, well, that's up to her. I hope she learned to be nicer. Me too, sweetheart, me too. Sometimes standing up to a neighborhood tyrant means you'll face months of harassment, legal threats, and stress that keeps you awake at night. But if you document everything, find allies among your neighbors, and don't back down from what's right, even the most entrenched bully can be defeated. This is a dramatized story inspired by common HOA disputes, not legal advice.